There's that. There's that. And here we go. Hey, everybody, it's almost an agreement time. I got my very good friend Ron McPherson here with me. We're going to talk monies and schools and stuff, and I guess we'll talk about the superintendent situation too, because as I was getting ready for the show, I had a random thought pop in my head, but we'll get to that here in a second. Almost an agreement at gmail.com. You can get us on Facebook, on Twitter, or on YouTube, or on your favorite podcast provider. While you're at any of these places, please like, share, follow, subscribe, friend, tweet, retweet, whatever the other things is. If you're on any of the podcast providers, 5-star reviews, stuff like that helps other people find us. You don't have to say nice things, you just have to score us high. almostanaagreement.com/cityelections21. That's my city election cheat sheet. Tomorrow is the last day of early voting, and then a general is on Tuesday of next week, so we're running out of time for those of you city residents to get your brain set up to go vote. So that's what's going on with that part of things. Yeah, that's the update of things going on. So get out and vote if you haven't done so yet. You got today or tomorrow for early voting, and then you actually have to go to your polling place on Tuesday if you haven't done it yet. Don't worry, the kids won't be there because school's out for it, so that makes things a little bit nicer or easier for the comings and goings. So almost agreement, Ron McPherson, everybody. Hey, Ron, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Seth, for having me.
Good. I'm glad to have you. So I got all excited because Mr. Governor Lee put out that presser like a month ago now, announcing that he wants to do a deep dive and get a bunch of committees together and look into how we fund our schools. Which, if you guys have ever listened to me before, you know that I'm super curious about how we fund our schools. And so I applied. I'm trying to get on there. And so I applied, and then I immediately started emailing anybody I knew that I thought might help me get there. And then I was thinking about it earlier today. Are you on any of these committees? Is that something that you had to apply for, or is that an automatic because of your position?
Not on any committees. No one reached out to Knox County. Here's what we're seeing, Seth, is, well, you probably know all this, but the steering committee is large. The central steering committee is largely made up of policymakers, with also the governor and Commissioner Schwinn on that committee. And I can tell you, and I'm not making a value statement here, but everyone on that committee seems to be Republican, which, and again, I'm not necessarily making a judgment on that. I'm just saying that what I hope is that the state is really interested in hearing the concerns around the state from the various counties and districts. And my hope is not that this is not just some sort of
right. This is a dog and pony show because the answer has already been made. We're just putting out because I was thinking about that too, and this is certainly my maybe tinfoil hat version of what's going on here. Is with everything that's going on and how bad the schools look with the mask thing and all the different Corona stuff that's been going on and stuff like that. It almost feels to me like the governor's office has done a really good job making public schools look like crap. Everybody knows he's a voucher guy. And so now he puts this, let's talk about funding thing out, and then he's going to staff it the way he does, and he's going to have all 18 committees, and, one committee is going to have a hard time coming up with a solution. And now we have 18 committees that are going to come up with 100 different solutions. And then really he's going to pick the one he was going to do in the first place. And then he can say, look at all the involvement we had in doing so because we had all these committees, and this is what all these committees came up with, when the reality is probably not a single person or only a handful of people even lean towards whatever the final solution is. And that's something that I'm concerned about too, which is why I wanted to be on one. I wanted to be in the room and be part of the conversation, because I get a earful from a handful of people time and time again about being open to the idea of vouchers. I don't know that I agree with what the attempt was last time Governor Lee did it, but I think in talking to you and talking to other school board members and talking to other parents in and around the schools, talking to my parents from when I was a student here in Knox County, as well as other places I went to school and stuff like that. I think there's a general consensus that this isn't going great. That there are kids that are falling through this system. There are the general the overarching median of student achievement or whatever is getting lower and lower year in and year out. And moral of the story being, I think there's a consensus that there is room for things to get better. Maybe that's the most generous way to put it. And so, when something as significant as a major change in how we're going to fund our schools is on the table, I got excited. I was like, this is one of those opportunities that we don't get often, to have a real fundamental change in how we look at how we fund our schools. If it was honest and true from the get-go, which, we can theorize on what we think's actually happening versus what is happening and stuff like that. But again, I think I got really excited about it before my tinfoil hat kicked in, and then I was like, oh, I see what's going on here. And so, I don't know, I'm still hopeful. I know there's only like 5 of the 18 committees have been filled.
That's probably right. We do have on one of the subcommittees, Senator Briggs, I noticed, is on there. Chris Letsos, who's president of the Knox Ed Foundation, is on there. So that's, though we're happy about that. Didn't see on the other 4 that have been noticed, I didn't see any representation there. I think another thing that it does concern us a bit on the steering committee, and again, it's largely made up of legislators, and we don't see any from the Knox area on there. There are a couple there, I think, from Shelby, in the Shelby area, maybe one from Davidson, maybe 1 or 2 from Hamilton. I'd have to go back and look, but none from Knoxville. And someone actually even made the comment that there's no county east of Chattanooga even represented on. I'm not saying that was by design. I'm just saying that sometimes it's a little bit of a concern on the steering committee. Will they take seriously the recommendations from the subcommittee, and will the subcommittee be represented by a wide range of?
Right. I mean, I honestly, as we're talking about it, I find it fascinating that you are not an automatic. It would make sense to me that Knox County is the fourth largest district in the state. Third largest district in the state. And I love your stat. I use it all the time. We have 6% of all the students in the state and get 4% of the funding. I love that stat. I throw it out constantly. But that if we're talking about school money, maybe the guy who is in charge of the money at the 4th largest district in the state, or 3rd or whatever, it doesn't, point being, I would think that the big 5 would all be represented by their own finance people, because when the conversation comes up, I would think that you would have more answers than the average bear, at least. And again, affecting more students than other people that are going to be a part of it. So yeah, that kind of boggles my mind that there's not at least a current finance people. So I want to come back to this for sure. But I had a thought when I was getting set up that I really wanted to ask you about, and I kind of hinted at the intro. So Bob Thomas has announced his retirement. He's going to finish this school year. Over the summer, we're going to replace the superintendent. Does that have any effect on your job?
I hope not, but you never know.
but not directly. The new superintendent can come in and fire everybody and start from scratch. I get that part of it, but at least it's not automatic, like you're reapplying for your job after this. It's nothing changes for you unless the new superintendent changes it.
That's right. So I've been through a couple of superintendent changes. So this is my second gig here, right? And so right now I'm CFO and assistant superintendent of finance and human resources. Prior to that, I was executive director of finance, and I served under both Dr. Lindsay, Charles Lindsay, Roy Mullins in the interim basis, and Jim McIntyre. And so I kind of took a 4-year hiatus and went to Emerald Youth Foundation as CFO, and then came back here. And so I've been in my present role. So worked for several different superintendents, and fortunately, it was all were fine, and worked well with all of them. So my hope would be whoever the next one is, that would continue, but there's never any guarantees. Obviously.
Right. There's room for conversation at least. All right. So, I've cultivated a relationship with you, and so I don't want you to go anywhere because it makes my life easier. I
may have to use you as a reference.
I'll take it. I don't know. I might be bad for you because I might be. They might be mad at you for spilling all the secrets that you spilled to me. But okay, so like I said, that was a random tangent that I was thinking about. So, but back to the topic at hand, and so again, we're gonna get these committees filled, and it's gonna do this thing. Has there been any? Because I know Governor Lee in the presser, as in the Q&A section, didn't give any sort of timing. Like, actually was explicit about, we don't have a time frame in mind. We just have a promise that we're going to go through this process.
That's my understanding too. I will say there has been some talk that by the time all of the process with respect to gathering input and ideas from the various subcommittees and then on to the steering committee, once then if a model is then put forth, a different model, that could take a while, and we may be looking at 2023. It'll have to go before the legislature, right? If there's a reform here in the funding model, and I would be surprised if that even was ready for 2022. I would suspect. I don't have any idea.
Right, and in the wonderful world of politics in the state of Tennessee, this could get real crazy because it could be put forth and it could be written up officially, and it's not going to hit until maybe That's a 23 or a 24, which we might have a whole different legislature by that point, and everything's going to, we might have a different governor by that point. It depends on how the world turns over the next couple of years, which that's kind of, I don't know. I guess that's a fail-safe a little bit that might give us an opportunity to, okay, well, these committees put out this thing and we don't really like it, so we can start really advocating for the next cycle of elections and then make sure the legislature doesn't pass it, sort of thing. So it does give us a little stopgap, I suppose, if it goes horribly wrong. But it may also it also means that we're looking 4, 5, 6 years out before any of this stuff really takes effect. And for someone like me, that I'm literally going to have a junior, senior or so by then. And so all these efforts to change the way we do schooling, and my kid's going to be out, which is normal. That's my life. Like I remember both at UT and Bearden High School, the year after I left school, the major money was spent on new music facilities. Like Bearden built a new band room, got a bunch of new instruments and equipment my freshman year in college, and then when I graduated from UT, that's when they tore down and rebuilt the music building on campus. So that is my lot in life. So I guess I should expect exactly that. Okay, so again, all right. So to shift a little bit into the more current event stuff that's going on, the latest I'd seen was about 500 students have. I don't know, whatever the technical term is, removed themselves or parents removed them from the school system. And again, we've had this conversation before about how the funding currently works. And, because I've heard people, everybody listening's heard me say this rant before, but as a consequence or as a curiosity or because I don't like myself, I'm in both the major Facebook groups that are fighting right now about the mask thing and all the different stuff going on. And so I'm trying to stay involved and stay at least semi-accurate to the mood of these two groups, and so the one group is advocating for people to pull their kids out because it hits the school system where it hits the school system where it hurts most, and that's financially. And so if I understand from one of the last times we talked correctly, if I pull my kids out today, how will that affect the funding for my school or the district as a whole, and when? Okay.
If that happened today, it would not affect funding necessarily for this school year. Where it could, and so funding is at the district level. It's not at the school level, although part of the BEP reform, potentially that could change at any rate. So the way the state looks at it is each year they look at they look at the previous year enrollment, right? And they put so much weight on around October, so much in November, and there's a method to their madness why they do it this way. But they look at 4 different periods of time, and they weight it accordingly, and that's what your funding is based on. So it's based on your enrollment numbers from the prior year. But let me just say this. So since the pandemic occurred, we lost, Seth, I'd have to go back and look. Like you say, it may have been 500, 1,000. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look. The state, that was a dynamic that occurred statewide. And so, you had multiple districts, probably the majority of districts had that same thing going on. And so the state held harmless, right, districts whose enrollment went down.
Right, on the 2021 school year.
That's on the 20. Yes, it went down in 2021.
Right. So leading into this school year, funding was based on essentially the 1920 school year's attendance.
Yeah, whichever the previous.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
right.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So and they called it a hold harmless, right? Now, it may have affected funding, because I don't think, when you go back and look at that, I don't know that we would. I think we probably would have gotten what otherwise would have been growth money. Obviously, if our enrollment had increased, we would have gotten more money.
Right.
But it turns out we didn't get less money. We still got more money, but it was based on the previous year's enrollment. And the reason there was more money was there were more in the pool because of the just natural revenue growth.
Right.
So, we obviously we don't want to lose students at all, but unless there's just like mass numbers of kids leaving the district, I don't know that it would, make a serious difference in funding, right? If you have like a couple of hundred here and a couple of hundred there. So, but you never know. I mean, the more it could come back and bite you, the more and more kids that would enroll.
Right. Okay. So
expanding levels.
Right. So, I'd emailed you a couple questions because they were specific number things, and I wanted you to have them ready so I didn't have to look them up on time. And so the first question was, how much does the state send per pupil? And I bring this up now because it's like, well, if the number's 500 and they send 500 less per pupil next year, but they also adjust that for some inflation and growth rate kind of things, it's like, I'm trying to understand what the actual impact of these parents that are pulling their kids out right now is going to be next year. Because right now it's a bonus for us that are keeping our kids in because the funding's still there. We just have less kids to deal with. So bonus for those of us that are still in school, get your kids out of the way if you don't want them there. And, we'll spend the money that your kids are supposed to get on the rest of the kids. That's essentially what's going on right now. And that's fine. And I understand it as a protest thing on the other people's side of it, or as a personal safety choice, whatever kind of argument you want to make as a parent. That's none of my business. I just know I'm just trying to see the bonus effect of this because you take your kid out, I get 1/60,000th of the money that your kid was set for it. So what's that number that the state provides?
It's about $3,900. I looked at this. Now, this was from the 2020 total, which was the last set of statewide data that we had to work with.
Okay, so
certainly it would be less than that, but you're looking at. I mean, it came out to like $3,914.
So we'll just say $4,000 because we're lazy and I don't want to do that.
3,900.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's for the year.
Now, on that, when the state sets up their BEP and they set up all the funding and different stuff, is there a state minimum that they require spent in the schools?
There is a yes. There is a. Let me phrase it this way. So there is an obligation. There is a state minimum obligation on the local side, right? And so the state will say, this is the amount of funding in the BEP pool. They will then apply it to every district. The formula is generally the same for every district. So they use, and it's largely based on the state salary schedule of a teacher. And so then they will then prorate that number or multiply that number by the number of students at each grade level. And so the bulk of that would be the teaching force, but then there are other positions too. So it's pretty much position driven, right? It's a student or a staff to student or student to staff ratio.
Okay. So all right, I apologize because what I'm trying to figure out here is, because again, like I understand that we're the donor county or whatever, and we have more ability to raise funds as a county because we're larger. We have more people here, blah 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 blah, and so we have more obligation in the state's program to pay for our schools than others. And so what I'm trying to figure out though is there a number that the state wants to be spent on kids, whether it's 2 times whatever they're giving the bigger counties or whether it's a fixed, the state says you have to spend $9,000 a kid. We're kicking in for, you make up the rest, which is essentially what's happening here.
Yes.
naturally.
So
But is that a
number? I'd have to go back and look, and it would vary per district, right? Because there is so they base it. Here's the state amount, that the state will allocate to districts based on the BEP formula. Then they also have what they call a minimum amount that must be matched from local sources. That's going to change depending on, the district. I can tell you that Knox County spends way, way, way more than what would be required at the local level.
So, I mean, I didn't have you prep this one, but do you know approximately offhand what the minimum that Knox County is required?
I can get it for you. I'd have to pull the formula, Seth, but it's easy to find. And I will tell you that, again, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here. We've talked about this before, but it's that fiscal capacity index that really comes back and bites us, because it's based on a county or district's ability to fund their portion of education, right? So it's not about how many, it's not about your tax base on what you actually raise. It's about the potential for what you could raise. And, for us, it's been 20 years since there's been a tax increase. Again, I'm not on here trying to advocate for anything like that. I'm just saying that.
Right. But we could have done a tax increase and that would go into the potential of how much we could be making. And that's in their formula, even though we're not raising taxes locally.
That's right. So, that's right. So the BEP is actually reduced based on our ability to pay its own way.
Right. So here's a question that you probably don't know the answer to. Is there a state maximum to property tax? I know we have a window of how much local sales tax we're allowed to do. Because again,
we have property tax. I doubt it, but
I mean, if that would be the potential, we could max out whatever we're allowed to charge in property tax, whoever gets to create that number, and that's our potential earnings.
Yeah, but but we get the biggest bang for our buck could come from sales tax, because it's 9.25 on the dollar here,
right?
And so it's 7% to the state and 2.25 to the local option portion that comes back to the districts. There's another 0.5 out there though, that the county could, by referendum, they could put that to a vote and try to claim that additional point. So the max at the state is 9.75 for any
right.
district.
Right. When we could put it at 2 flat, a 2 1/4, 2 3/4, but 2 3/4 would be the maximum we're allowed to do.
Yeah, and that's right. And it could be, it's been a while since I've looked at this, but you're probably talking $30 million or more a year that would accrue to the schools just by doing that. And so the thing is that at some point, does the state come in and claim that? And if so, we don't get dollar for dollar anymore. So, there's kind of there's an argument that could be made.
Well, either way, the state will shave a few percent off for just the back and forth between collection.
Yeah.
Businesses sending it to Nashville and then sending it back here, because that's how we handle our tax revenue here, which is so weird. But yeah, again, I don't know. This is what, the third, fourth time you've been on the show, and we've gotten more in depth each time, and I appreciate it, trying to get an understanding of how it currently works. And so, just for the sake of comparison, I sent you Roane County. No rhyme or reason for it, but just I figured you had access to that information, and so just to compare to the $4,000 that we get, the $3,900 that we get from the state for our students, compared to Roane County gets
$5,438.
Okay, but then they also have a percentage they have to match.
They would
locally, but we don't necessarily know what that is. It's a bunch of math.
We could actually go through and calculate it for every school district in the state.
Right.
The data's out there. It's just a matter of, you just have to go in search of it and grab it and pull it down.
Because again, right,
something we used to look at.
Right, because to me, I just feel like there is a number that the state has in mind that they want spent per kid, and it's this really complicated way of getting there, instead of just saying, hey, spend $9,000 a kid, we're going to give you this much. Like, I feel like that's what's happening. It's just in a really weird, long, roundabout way. And because, again, to me, going back to the beginnings and all these committees and stuff, is, I've had a lot of conversations with school board reps about, you know, what is the right number? How much do we need to be spending on kids to get the result we want? Because I'm a big proponent. I think that'd be the way to do it, is work backwards. How much in 13 years should it cost to get a soft little squishy baby into a minimally functional adult at 18? You know, and then work our way backwards to figure out how much we need to spend and when and where. But
we're actually in the process of doing that internally.
You're welcome. My idea. I do these things all the time.
We'll give you credit for that. Yeah. You know, a good place to start too is, you know, we've got the ESSER money, right? And so ESSER 3.0, you have to spend it by 2024. But the ESSER money will allow us to do a lot of things we couldn't do otherwise with respect, particularly to interventions and some technology needs and so forth. But those are one-time dollars. They're not sustainable. So I guess the question is for those items that prove to be worthwhile, where we can actually demonstrate, and we will be required to demonstrate to the state, you know, there's an accountability factor for how you use the dollars and what the results have been.
Right.
So I think that would probably, you know, has to go into the calculation for what we would need. Another thing that is a priority and continues to be is teacher salaries. We lose really good teachers to higher paying neighboring districts. We're probably about the state average, $52,000 a year.
Man, I'll tell you what, maybe it's my school and maybe all the teachers, male or female, married well, but the parking lot at my kid's school has some nice vehicles in it. Some very nice vehicles in it.
I drive a F-150, so I need to know how they.
I mean, my kids, they both had the same teacher. One had her in kindergarten, the other had her in first grade. She's got what is it? One of those Mercedes SUVs.
Wow.
It's not a nothing car, I tell you that much. But you know, again, they're not.
Not sure how they could do that on a teacher's salary, but more to them if however they do that.
She's been a teacher for a long time, so she might have hit some level of awesomeness that she got extra money. And she's a great teacher, and I'm not trying to disparage anything of it. I just like every once in a while I'll notice in the parking lot, I'm like, man, all these, they must be marrying well or something. I don't know, because like again, it's like, you know, everybody talks about how terrible teachers are paid, and then I get to see all these cars, and I go. And then I have another friend. I have a friend that's a teacher, and she's got a 1998 Corolla that she still drives. So.
Wow.
There's a spectrum at least.
Yeah, sounds like.
But again, I guess like the going back to the how we're going to change this thing. Do you feel like this is gonna be a legitimate attempt at it? I don't know how else to ask that question without it turning into a little bit, maybe a little bit more than your job title should answer.
I hope it is. I'm really though I have to withhold judgment on that until I actually see. You know, one of the things I guess that continues to cross my mind is here's what needs. This is just me talking. That, you know, what we really need is a bigger pie, right? There needs to be more funding in the state of Tennessee, and so is this going to be? How might the governor or the legislature do this?
Ooh, calling me. I know the answer. Legal weed, people. Legal weed. Get it done.
A couple of ways to do this, right? Is increase taxes. I don't think the governor's going to be doing that. He's on record saying he's not going to do that. The only other way to do it would be to essentially take funding away from other state programs and so forth and put it into education.
No. See, or go legal weed and put a special tax on it that only goes to the schools, and we'll have more money than we know what to do with. It's a fact. I hate it. It drives me crazy. I don't smoke. I never liked it. It's just not me. But the premise that we're going to wait till it goes federal and then we're going to make no money off it as a state, when it's going to happen. I've talked to so many people in so many positions of elected office that agree of the inevitability. Yeah. It's going to happen. It's just, it's not an electable issue, so nobody's going to fight for it. And it drives me crazy because we sit here and we can talk about nickels and dimes all day and how little it's going to change things. Or we could inject billions of dollars a year into our school systems with something that's going on every day, all day, all around us anyway. It's not like this is not happening. It's just not getting taxed or regulated in any way. And so we have bad drugs on the streets instead of good, well-regulated ones making us money in the time. Anyway, that's my pothead rant, and I apologize, but it drives me crazy just on the financials. It's not a thing for me. I'm not a recreational user. I've never enjoyed it the couple times I've tried it. It's just a money thing. I want more money in the schools too, and this is a really easy way to get it without raising general taxes on normal people. Without raising property taxes, without adding a percentage, without taking away services we already have in like. Now, I'm sure there's room for drop-in services that cost a lot of money at the state level that we could maybe bring into the schools, and that's a conversation worth having. But if we want to take a big swipe at this thing, I think that's the most logical, simplest way. That, like, because my sister's a teacher in Colorado, and the first year they had it, like she told me a story about her principal came in and was like, you what do you need for your classroom? She's like, nothing. She's like, yeah, you need something. We got to figure out how to spend this money or they're not going to give it to us next year.
Wow.
And so, like, computers, new crazy projectors, all sorts of cool new toys and bells and whistles. And to the point where they're ordering stuff they don't want or need just to keep the budget part rolling, which is in its own grossness. That's a separate issue to me as well. But that was the situation. They had a
problem to have.
I think the second year they had legal weed in Colorado, their state constitution has a requirement that if a certain amount gets collected and doesn't have allocated need, it's required to be returned. They got a tax return from the state. I think it was the second or third year that that they had this thing.
Get money back.
Right. While they're spending more money than they've ever spent in their schools, while they're fixing roads that have been needed fixed for decades, like the amount of money I don't think Tennessee will do as well just because it's late to the game, but it's crazy to me that part of the conversation is too scary to have. It just needs to happen. But anyway, we got way off on weed, and I didn't mean to do that to you. But again, I think I just don't know how we can reasonably assess what is actually happening with this most complicated of funding things and then have a real conversation about how to fix it when, again, I make this joke all the time. I believe that I'm probably top 10 persons in Knox County on how we fund our schools, and I don't have a clue what's going on. And so how are we supposed to watch these committees and hear all the stories that are going to come out of things we're going to change and things we're going to do when we don't even know what is yet?
That's right.
And then have a reasonable, discussion about, okay, well, they want to do this, that, and that. Well, what's that changing from now? I mean, they could literally come out of a committee meeting and tell us exactly what we're doing now and frame it in a way that makes it sound good and great, and everybody gets excited and nothing changes because nobody knows.
I think the thing that too, one of the things that concerns me is, and you touched on the voucher thing, where when it's a student-based model, as they call it, or a weighted model, there is from what I understand on these particular models, that it's a minimum per student, where the dollars follow the student everywhere the student goes.
Right.
Then they layer that with supplemental type funding that may be based on socioeconomic status or language barriers, students with disabilities, and so forth. And those are great. But the thing I think that concerns us a bit is, for one thing, we already heavily fund, well, not heavily fund, but so we reallocate resources based on those very things. If the dollars follow the students, when we looked at this, and it was really, this was several years ago, and it was similar to what the model Nashville uses, I think, at the time, and we just did it for our own purposes, kind of a back of the envelope type thing. And what it showed for us is that it actually harmed financially some of our more urban schools. So they would have, in an approach like this, they would actually receive less than what they currently do, because we reallocate resources for those high needs schools. I'm not saying that this new, whatever this new model may look like, I'm not saying that will happen. But if the dollars follow the student, I'm not sure what that necessarily looks like. And does that put more autonomy? Does that give principals more autonomy?
Right.
Some principals may want to take on that challenge. I think there's a lot that probably wouldn't. So again, there's just a lot of unanswered questions too, Seth, that we have. Another thing is they say that this model that they hope, and this comes straight out of the state, incentivizes student outcomes. Well, we hope everything incentivizes student outcomes, but I'm not sure what that means.
Well, because right, and the question always being, does number of dollars spent equate to, is it a 1-for-1 on spend more money, higher outcomes, or is it, and I think the first time we talked, you put it best in that it's usually the inverse.
It is.
And so the question is, what is that? Yeah. What is the actual factor at play? Which I think we talked about too. I think the reality is it's home economics is the number one factor to what results come out. And so I think that's one of the things too that I don't know if it's going to be part of this conversation in some of this reorganization is how do we address those home issues without putting it on the schools to be the ones doing it? Or if we do put it on the schools, how do we fund the schools to help handle that? Because I think that's one of the things that a lot of people complain about all the time, and I agree with. There's we put so many things under the umbrella of what our schools are doing or should be doing, and I understand it on an access point. Like the teachers get to see these kids all the time, and so as in outside of family, there's some kids that the only time they're anywhere outside of their own family is in the schools, and this is an opportunity to engage and interact, and if there's problems, and that's why I assume it falls on the schools currently. But is that the best way, or could it be just a signal and then other programs come in and help that specifically aren't coming out of the school budget to do these sort of things? And so that's one of the things I'm hopeful to hear at least some conversation about, because I think that again, the stats show it fairly clearly.
Absolutely.
That we could spend a gajillion dollars if the kid in their home life is economically disadvantaged and or a number of other factors outside of the school, the results aren't going to change whether we spend $10,000 or $100,000 on that kid.
We looked, this is interesting. So we did a comparison of how we spent our dollars. This was a couple of years ago with stacked up against the other big four, right? So we took like the big 5 districts in the state. That would be Shelby and Metro Nashville, Knox, Hamilton, and Rutherford. And we looked at just a host of things. And what we noticed is with regards to student outcomes, it was directly an inverse correlation, right? So of the big 5, Shelby spent the most, had the lowest outcomes, right? And it was because of demographics.
Oh, wait, real quick, I'm going to interrupt real fast. What is? Do you know off the top of your head what Shelby gets off from this as their state portion?
I can find that out.
Is it more or less?
Oh, they would get more. Well, I'm pretty sure they would get more than Knox.
Okay, just that's fine. That's enough of an answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they can get a considerable amount more in federal funding than Knox, as well. But second was high spender was Metro Nashville. Then they were the next to last. Again, these are on the big 5 in student outcomes. Third was Knox, and so. The higher up the chain, so then you got like Rutherford was the I think they had the highest. No, actually Knox did pretty well on some of these, depending on if you look at reading, math, and all of that. But regardless of that, the lowest with spending I think was Rutherford, but yet they had the higher student outcomes in certain areas. So it was just an inverse correlation, and money doesn't guarantee that your achievement will go up. It's more about we're doing everything we can to drive resources where they're needed, and those resources are needed in economically disadvantaged areas.
Right. And again, it makes total sense that it works that way. It's just, but again, you're like taking that factor and then talking solutions and how do we fix and how do we do better kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it lends an easy argument to, well, the bigger pie makes sense, but is that really something that's going to get us better outcomes? And again, I think it's more of we have a more of a systematic issue at play, how we do schools, why we do schools, the way we do schools, than I think there's necessarily the financing part of things. Like I think.
Yeah. And I think, here in a couple of years, we're going to find out with regards to the ESSER funding, where we've put those, we're sinking a lot of money into tutors, and in technology. We put quite a bit in virtual learning, and so we're going to see. When we have the accountability factor, the state's kind of holding districts' feet to the fire on this, and hey, did it make a difference? And if it doesn't make a difference, then there's a larger question that has to be asked. Obviously there's systematic issues involved that we can't fix as a district, but
right. Well, see, but that's one of the problems to me, is that you're not allowed to. Is that I think that the state's the one that's fixing said problems, and they can't fix a Knoxville kid, and a Nashville kid, a Roane County kid, whatever. Right. We can list off any subgrouping of the state as we want. They're not the same people, and to have one body in one place, try to adjust a whole system around whatever the results are. And again, too, I think I've heard different conversations, and it's like the TN ready or ready TN or whatever it is. But I still am not convinced that we have a clear and unified goal on what we want our kids to be coming out of the school systems. And that, again, probably being an impossibility because everybody's got their own take, but, some sort of direction on what we're trying to achieve, because, that goes into the same conversations about the systematic changes that would need to be made as well as the financial ones, because, well, if the goal is X and we're not moving towards that, then changes all the money, it changes all the other sides and parts and pieces of it. Because I think there's room for changing the way we do schools. I think I guess my concern is, and maybe this is just, it's easy to say and harder to do, is that we just do it this way because we've done it this way.
Yeah, I get you. And you hate to fall into that sort of mindset, and sometimes you just get kind of swallowed up in it and you don't even realize it. Right. And I can tell you, for instance, BP, for instance, is 30 years old. That was in 92, I think. And now I will tell you, we do take a hard look at our staffing allocations, which is where most of the money goes, right? Each year we look at, we try to base that on a couple of things, on the demographics of the school, the size of the school, and so forth, and based on how what you earn. I will also say that has to pass muster with the feds, that the state comes in and monitors that. So we can't just arbitrarily choose a school and just say, hey, we're going to stick an additional 10 teachers there. You have to treat schools equitably. So we have schools in certain tiers. So as long as you can show that you have a methodology, then it will pass muster. But we're always looking at the staffing formula. How can we do this better? How can it be more equitable? And we're always trying to improve it. But and with regards to pedagogy and instructional delivery and so forth, that's kind of out of my lane. Right.
And again, but that's the point, though, is that this is coming from the state, and we just have to adjust. I can't remember, it was might have been Christy when I had her in here. She I think she put the best analogy to it. It's like, the state sets up the guardrails, and we just have to work within it, and we have a little bit of room to do stuff, but end of the day, some of the specifics, and again, going back to we do it this way because we do it this way. This is a state conversation, not Knox County Schools. Because I think too, one of the things that a lot of parents are maybe coming to realize now because of what's going on is who you actually answer to as a school board. You answer to the school. You as an administrator, or you as part of the staff answer to the school board, but the school board answers to the state. They don't answer. Yeah. They don't answer to Knox County. They don't answer to the city of Knoxville. Like I keep running the joke. It's Tennessee State Schools Knoxville chapter.
Correct.
And I think that's one of the confusing things for people, because they want to go down to a school board meeting and say their piece, when it really needs to be yelling at Gloria Johnson or Eddie Manis or Massey or Briggs or one of those. Those are the people that are actually have the authority to make changes in this thing. And I don't think we as the populace understand that correctly.
You're probably correct.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's why I feel like I have some sort of value in doing this show, is because I didn't know that a year ago. I mean, I certainly didn't know that a year ago, and we're sitting here with a city election in front of us, but next year is going to be crazy. How many school board members are on the docket next year? Not
Oh
to
gosh, Seth, I'd have to look.
not to mention we're gonna have at least
You.
one's getting zoned out of her own district.
Yeah, when that would take effect, when that becomes official or when it takes
I
effect, I don't.
believe it's January or February of next year is when rezoning officially kicks in.
Okay.
And so she doesn't lose her seat for being redistricted out, but she can't run to keep her seat.
Got it.
Because she's no longer eligible for that seat. Which I find really unfortunate, just the way we do redistricting here, because I think the school board is the only one that has real effects from changing it. I think the Knox County Commission's not going to fundamentally change no matter how they rezone it, but the schools will a lot. And the entire commission is on, but one school board member is on the redistricting committee. And I think it's Christy as the chair. She's obligated to be on it.
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Ebony, it may just be Christy. I'm not sure.
Yeah. And so, okay. I need to talk to them more about the superintendent search. We had the meeting last week. Okay. So I guess since I have you as a closing point, is a little bit softer. What do you want out of a superintendent? Like, what helps you get your job done if you were part of the committee to help choose the new superintendent? Like, what are some key features of an effective superintendent for you?
Okay. So I think, for one thing, losing Bob Thomas, that was a guy that he pretty well had a handle on it from the ground up. Like he started out, he's going to be hard to replace that kind of experience. So he started out as a sub, then became a teacher. This is like early 70s. And then he became, then he became an assistant principal, and then a school administrator, a principal. Then he moved up into personnel office, which is now human resources. Then he became superintendent or assistant superintendent of finance, human resources, and some operations. Then he became superintendent. So he kind of he has an idea of, from the ground up of all this wealth of experience.
So did I hear you just offer your services to be the next superintendent? Is that what I was hearing? Because you have the institutional awareness and understanding to be a good super.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't go there. But I do think it's helpful for someone who has been in the classroom or has been a school administrator,
right?
And accessible, and I think and I will tell you, places of value on equity. I know that this superintendent, his goals have remained the same throughout, and one of those goals has been eliminating disparities, and that's a tough lift, I'll tell you.
Right.
But he's implemented a lot of, he's put forth some committees, he's made some real changes in that area, so he does have a heart for that, and I think, the next superintendent would be great if the next superintendent had that same kind of passion for that. And I think, I keep going back to Bob Thomas because, and I've served under multiple superintendents, but and did well under both. But everyone has their unique skill set and different management styles. He's kind of a guy that lets those who in expertise in certain areas do their job, and he trusts the expertise of those individuals he's put in place. So I think it would be a superintendent that does see the value in carrying on the strategic plan goals, which is eliminating disparities is one. Building a positive culture, I think we have made strides in that. I think COVID has really set us back some though, because there's the opinions. People are passionate from whether on one side or the other. So we do still have some work there. But I think we were making strides, and obviously increasing student achievement. So those are the three. The next superintendent will work with the board to establish whatever goals they see fit. But those are three pretty good goals, I think. And so we'll see, who the next one is. And if I'm fortunate enough to serve under them, then I'll do my best.
All right. Well, again, I don't know that person that you're talking about, so we'll have to see when we get there. Because again, I think it's one of those, it's a very well lit position in a community. Everybody kind of maybe not everybody, but a good number of people know the name. They hear it in the news here and there.
Yeah.
but again, don't really know where it comes from and don't know necessarily
Right.
what the totality of the job is. Because again, as I understand it, it's more of a management job than it is. It's not necessarily a teacher. It's just trying to get
Correct.
all the
It
parts
is.
and pieces doing what they're supposed to be doing as prescribed by the state and or school board. I mean, that's the
Yeah, that's right. It is. It is. You know, and I do think it's helpful if the superintendent, the next whoever it is, has it's not a hill to die on, but if they have experience out, you know, as an administrator, because you know, it's kind of like you know, a general. Do you want you know, in a war, hopefully, you know, the commanders have had experience down in the trenches maybe, and kind of know what has to be done on the ground, rather than, you know, someone just coming right out and putting them in the Pentagon, you know. But
right.
So yeah, I think there's probably great superintendents around the country who have never been a classroom teacher or an administrator. There's probably lousy superintendents around the country that have. So it's not a hill to die on, I don't think. But I think it does give a perspective that, you know, knowing what's on, you know, going on at the school level. I remember 20 years ago when I first came on board here, I was like a senior accountant, I think at the time, is what they hired me. And, you know, I remember Bob Thomas, I was talking with him at the time, he was an assistant superintendent. He looked at me and he said, Ron, keep in mind that neither your job or any jobs here in finance exist apart from what goes on at the schools. That's
Right.
why you're here. So just very program and student centered, I think, is the key. And
See, I've been advocating for a good lawyer that can sue the state for more of our money back. That's been my big pitch.
I'm with you.
Whether, but I guess we could just use. I mean, or we just need a better county law department to help with that. I don't know. I'm not sure how that all works out, but I think again, I think this funding situation is so painfully complicated that for a parent out here, which is normal parent trying to figure out how to get their kid through the school system, get the best education, get the best out of the schools for their kid, it's easy to just say more money, but then to actually break it down and see how it works. And again, I think that, like it or not, I think that's one of the things about the voucher pitch that's going to sell well, is that it's like, well, you get to control this parent. It's not out of your hands. It's in your hands. And, you know, the data says that a lot of the voucher stuff ends up being with less quality results and this, that, and the other. But I don't know. There's parents that would rather have the control.
Yeah, and if the dollars follow the kids, you know, that you keep in mind that would presumably that would be like just a district average, right? And so there are some kids that need a lot more supports than that. You know, whether it's special education, you know, kids with IEPs or 504s. Just average per pupil funding is not going to be enough, you know, to cover that. So again, that's a parental choice if it comes to that. But I think the concern for us would be you wouldn't want parents to assume something that isn't necessarily true. That
Right.
you know, I can just go to, you know, another school or another like private school or whatever.
Right. And for me, the question is, one of the big questions is that, again, going back to how hard it is to understand the financing, is the economy of scale worth it? Like, you know,
Right.
You're not going to get a private school system that even comes pretend close to how big Knox County Schools is.
Mhm.
And is that an advantage to Knox County Schools in spreading out cost or not? I don't know the answer to that. You probably have a better idea than I do, but I'm just saying, like, the way, you know, in other logical things where you go into more business economics mindset on stuff, the economy of scale should be at play here.
That's right.
And to what percentage it is and how it's going to be hard for, you know, a smaller private school to compete with that by, you know, maximizing the use of the dollars they get. It's going to be, it could potentially be a very, it's a very difficult concept to sell to a parent when they're just trying to figure out what's best for their kid.
Exactly.
So, all right, Ron, I don't know what else. You got anything else important that I missed? I'm sure there's 1,000 things, but
no, I'm good, Seth. Always feel free to reach out if you need any information. Be happy to zoom it your way.
I still have kids in the school system, so I got to go get them here in a minute. So, well, Ron, like I said, I really appreciate you. I think it's important, especially with what's going on right now, between the superintendent search and this how we finance schools thing going on in the state, that we get a better understanding as a public of what is, so that we can better analyze what they're trying to change it to. Because if we don't know where we're starting, there's no comparison when they say, well, this will be better. Well, how do we know that? Because we don't know what this is. It'll
Exactly.
be, and I'm guilty of it as other people are. There are times when it's different is good enough for me. It doesn't have to be better. It just can't continue to be the same thing. And schools are, a lot of stuff in government's like that for me. It's like, we've done it this way. It's not working anymore. Different might be the right play, because at least we get to see how bad different is. At least we have some data to work with. So anyway, I ramble. Ron,
I'll just one last thing, Seth. It's a welcome sign for us that at least there's an acknowledgement that BEP is probably not the best way to do this right now. And so it kind of goes back to your point that hey, we welcome looking at change. I just hope that it will lead to, really, it will be beneficial to all districts across the state. Let me say it that way.
See, I have the answer. It's a very simple answer, and that's why nobody will take it. We take that 7% the state takes, and we take a portion of that 7%, whether it's 2, 3, 3.5, whatever percent of that we want, and then we fix that number and say 3.5% of state sales tax goes into the education fund. Period. Okay. And then how we reallocate, that's a whole separate argument, and we can get into that part of it. But then there's no this year, that year kind of thing. It's like, because the guys the people that do the math on how much we anticipate collecting are pretty good at it, except for last year, because they were opposite wrong. They went low and it went real high. But, for the most part, they're pretty good at, in January of 23, we're going to collect X number of dollars in sales tax revenue in the state. They know what they're doing. Not sure how they're so good at it, but they are. And so instead of playing this,
it worked out for us this past year as the books closed, because we had an extremely conservative budget, because we were the year before expecting COVID to just decimate the economy. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. So it's helping our reserves, that's for sure.
Yeah, but so I'm just saying, but then there's no conversation about how much money's going in, and it's just a conversation about where it's going when it goes out. Because then that's that same math that we already do then projects, this is how much money we're going to have next year. This is how much money we're going to have the year after that.
That's right.
I don't know. I guess there should be some factor in there for how many kids are enrolled too, but still, I don't know. There's some sort of simplification would be a good start.
It would.
So anyway, more ramblings. Ron, go back to work. You have better things to do than talk to me.
Brother.
I really, really appreciate you. I'm gonna do an outro. If you want to stick around, if you want to get out of here, I can go either way.
Seth, I'll get on out. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Ron. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, Ron McPherson, everybody. I learned some things. I don't know if you guys did or not. Ron's the money guy. That's every dollar that goes to Knox County Schools goes.